Welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Gianta. I might be becoming a bad baseball fan who can't enjoy the romantic things because of advanced statistics. 15 years from now, I want to be on the early baseball committee. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran.
I literally have the Fangraphs hoodie, the baseball reference t-shirt, just repping some stats, you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily Hall of Fame, it's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to a short gut reaction edition of Above Replacement Radio. We're talking the Baseball Hall of Fame election. This is the third year in a row now we're doing a gut reaction to the Hall of Fame announcement. We really don't know what to expect here, which is going to make this one particularly fun.
That's one way to put it. I am nervous as all hell right now, Chris. This entire election cycle has thrown me for a loop in so many ways. I thought Scott Rolen was going to be a shoo-in. He only needed to gain 12%. He had some big gains a couple of years ago and last year, and he really hasn't seen that this year. And it's really going to go down to the wire with him. And on the flip side, I did not imagine in my wildest dreams we would be even thinking about Todd Helton right now at any point before maybe a couple weeks ago. Todd Helton, there's a shot he gets in. It's not, I think it's 50-50 with him as well as with Rolen, but he's at 78.7% of the vote right now. About 52% of the total vote is in, and we could see so many different things happen. I did not expect that we would be thinking about Rolen not getting in. I didn't think we'd be thinking about Helton maybe getting in. But there are so many things that can happen, and I just don't want to shut out, honestly. If only one of them gets in, then it's whatever, because the next one will cruise in next year. But we need somebody.
Yeah, because the reason why the potential of Helton being the only one in is so shocking is Helton had 51% last year. Mm-hmm. Rolen was at around 63%. It would be quite the shock. I mean, that doesn't usually happen, especially Helton's. It's not like it's Helton's 10th ballot or anything. It's not like why he's getting a dramatic rise. It's very surprising for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Helton has had years where he has had big gains, particularly between his first and second year and between his second and third year. And the private ballots tend to correlate with what the public ballots say for him. The same can't really be said for Scott Rolen. For him to get in, he's really going to need the public ballots or the private ballots to push him through, something that he's struggled with in the past. And I think the possibility for it is out there. And oh no, I swear to God, that didn't just happen.
Yeah, we're watching a stream here.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
We got a stream. We got MLB Network on. As we're recording right now, Brian Kenny is alongside who?
President of the Hall of Fame.
President of the Hall of Fame.
Greg, thank you so much. Here in the plaque gallery here in Cooperstown at the
Josh Rawitch, who is going to be announcing this ballot in a few minutes probably. There's usually like a little introduction about like the BBWA did this vote and this many ballots were cast to decide Hall of Fame.
It's stuff you don't really need to know.
One thing I will say is a shutout would obviously suck, but regardless of the results, I think this year is going to have a lot of positives come out of it, because we're at a point now where we know that Todd Helton's going to get in at the very least next year. We know that Billy Wagner is probably going to get in at the very least next year. I wasn't sure about him at all at any point. We could see Andrew Jones get up to 60% this year. At the beginning of the cycle, I was hoping he just gets 50. We could see him get to 60. And that means he'll have 4 years to get 15%, which would be pretty good. All right, that's the last thing I had to say.
Tonight, we are pleased to announce the addition of one
Yes!
to the Hall of Fame fraternity, be honored alongside Fred McGriff at the induction ceremony on July 23rd at the Clark Sports Center here in Cooperstown. A two-way superstar playing...
Scott Rolen is a Hall of Famer. Holy cow. Scott Rolen is a Hall of Famer. It looks like he got 73.6% of the vote. That's the same amount that Larry Walker got, so that means he made it by around 6 votes. Like I said, the private vote, it came through for him in a way that I didn't think would. Or not that I didn't think would, a way that it would have been very hard for it to have done so. 76.3% of the vote. He made it by about 5 votes. That's crazy.
Among third basemen, the Indiana native ranked
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I think Tibbs has the full. It does. Ryan Thibodeau has the full results. Scott Rolen at 76.3%, of course. Todd Helton had 72.2%. He missed by about maybe 10 or so votes. He'll get in no problem next year. Billy Wagner, 68.1% of the vote. That is a 17% gain for him. He needs 7% more for next year. That is excellent. Andrew Jones, 58.1%. That is also a 17-point gain for him. He was at 41.1% last year. That's encouraging. That means he's got 17% to gain over the next 4 years. That is very good. That's your guy, Chris, so I'm happy about that. Gary Sheffield, 55%. That is also a significant gain for him. He's going to need to gain 20% in his last year on the ballot. It's tough, but it's been done before. Larry Walker was actually at a less percent his last year before going in. Carlos Beltran debuts at 46.5%. I was hoping he would debut at 50, but 46 is fine. He's got 9 years to go. And a lot of writers tend to avoid first-year candidates sometimes just because they don't view them as first ballot candidates, but they view them as candidates in general. He'll be all right. Jeff Kent gets the exact same percent as Carlos Beltran. He is now off the ballot. He gets 46.5%. A-Rod gets 35.7%. That's around a 2% gain for him. I'm going to turn this down real quick. I'm going to mute this. I think I just paused it, though. Not that it really matters, but A-Rod gets around a 2% gain. Manny Ramirez at 33.2%. That's the first time he's broken 30%. He was at 28% for the last 3 years. He was like Chris Davis' 247 batting average. Next year is probably the last year that we need to start seeing gains from Manny if he's going to have any shot. Personally, I think it's probably over for him. He just finished his 7th year. He is 3 years now to get to. He needs 42% to vote for him that haven't already. And crazier things have happened, but I think it's very hard to see that many people change their minds on a guy with steroid allegations. Omar Vizquel is down to 19.5%. He was at 23% last year. So that is a slight drop for him. Andy Pettit, 17%. Bobby Abreu, 15.4%. My bold prediction at the Gut Reaction show last year was that Bobby Abreu was going to break 15%. It's his first time breaking 10%, and he ends up at 15.4%. Jimmy Rollins, 12.9%. Mark Burley, 10.8%. K-Rod, 10.8%. Torrey Hunter, 6.9%. Turns out the private ballots were a lot more friendly for him. So, Chris, what are your main takeaways from this list here?
I think what we kind of were optimistically predicting happened, given, there were 4 big, or definitely at least 3 big guys who had their last year on the ballot last year in Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Curt Schilling. So it opened up a lot of room for guys like, Scott Rolen, Todd Helton, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, along with those are the main 4 that
those are the big 4. Yeah,
they got a lot of increase, which is great to see. Also, really happy not to see a shutout. Considering it would have looked really bad for the BBWAA. 2 out of 3 years having a complete shutout. Really glad that didn't happen. And not just because of that, it's because Scott Rolen is very well deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. So that's the main takeaway. And happy to see Jones get 58% on his 5th year,
6th year,
Yeah. Happy to see Helton probably a shoe-in for next year, and Rolen being off next year makes it.
Mike Napoli, John Lackey, R.A. Dickey, Bronson Arroyo all got votes. Wait, where's Houston Street? Oh, he must be on the next slide of the graphic. Continue.
But yeah, with what was I about to say? With Rolen being off next year, I'm really happy that he doesn't have to be on the ballot next year because there's probably 3 guys that are going to get a lot of votes that that are new to the ballot next year in Utley, Beltray, and Maurer. So it's good to open up some space with Rolen being off next year.
Chris, you had a hot take during our gut reaction pod last year. Do you remember what it was?
No.
Okay, you didn't hit, but you were very close on it. You said Jeff Kent would get to 48%. You were 1.5% off. Obviously, not having a shutout is great, but forward progress is a huge theme of this year. Like I mentioned, Todd Helton and Billy Wagner, they look like shoo-ins for next year. I mean, Todd Helton very much does. Billy Wagner has to gain 7%, actually 6.9%, nice, in 2 years. Andrew Jones, given the gain that we just saw from Todd Helton, it's not impossible to say that Andrew Jones gets in next year. Todd Helton was at 52% of the ballot last year. He's now up to 72.2%. He's only got like a handful of votes left to gain for his induction. Billy Wagner, obviously, he's got maybe like between 20 to 30 votes, maybe, something like that. And Jones, he had a significant gain this year, like I mentioned, 17%. 58 plus 17, that would get him exactly to 75.
Yeah.
So if he has the same gain next year, he gets a 75. And if he doesn't, 2 more years, he'll be an eighth year guy. I think this is the most confident I've ever felt in Andrew Jones following a year. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I mean, we went from I don't know if he's going to get in to it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, it's great to see. When we broke down our Hall of Fame ballots and power ranked them, Andrew Jones was my number 2 guy and number 1 clean guy on the ballot. So that's something I'm happy to see. Getting the recognition he deserves, and it's what we optimistically were predicting. Kind of like probably a Rolen only. Despite all the twists and turns of what these, public ballots showed, and, what we perceived of the private ballots, it ended up being kind of exactly what we thought it would be, which is a Rolen only induction from the BBWAA. So
let's talk about Scott Rolen now that he's the highlight of the hour now. He had, they're just showing this graphic now, he had 10.2% of the vote on his first ballot. That's the lowest debut percent on the Hall of Fame ballot, eventually elected by the BBWAA, as they're just showing as a graphic now on MLB Network. This is one of the best representation of the true rise of the Sabre community in the BBWAA ballot, because on the surface, Scott Rolen might not look like a Hall of Famer if you're just looking at the very, very generalized basic level statistics like a lot of writers do, and like even more writers did in the past. But you know what? He's a perfect type of guy to be like, hey, his WAR. Because you know what? He was a good defender, a really good defender. He was a solid base runner, and he could hit too.
Yeah.
His hitting wasn't otherworldly. There are certainly plenty of other guys better. But Scott Rolen was a great all-around player. And WAR was a perfect stat to prove that.
Yeah, and what I just realized now is, like, if he did the same thing at the shortstop position, he would have been first ballot.
Yeah, he 100% would have.
Because he was, because
there's less expected out of shortstops offensively to begin with than third baseman.
Yeah, so, 8 or 9 or 10 Gold Gloves from him.
Yeah.
Along with, the metrics support him as well. He debuted at 10.2%, but also it's easy to forget how stacked some of those ballots were.
Yeah, I mean, he debuted, I think, with Mariano Rivera.
No, but
it was Chipper
Jones
and Jim Thome. Yeah, Mario was the year later. One thing I'm interested in, they're showing him in Cardinals gear on all these graphics here. I kind of thought they'd show him with the Phillies. He played more years there. He had relatively equal production both in St. Louis and in Philadelphia. He's definitely one of those guys where you wonder what cap he goes in with. I don't know.
I think the argument is he was more in the spotlight with St. Louis.
That's fair, and that's fair. I don't think either fan base will really have a problem with it. They both have very rich histories with Hall of Famers.
It's crazy. Now looking back, it's crazy to look at how bad the Phillies were, even with Bobby Abreu and Scott Rolen.
And Curt Schilling even.
And Curt Schilling.
Speaking of Abreu, very happy he's up to 15%. That's very cool of him. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sheffield is going to be the 10th year guy next year, and he is going to have to gain 20%. I don't think it's going to happen. I think next year is going to be a tough year for gains. But you know what? People really do like voting for guys in their 10th year. Like, you look at Fred McGriff, he had some of the best 10th year, like, he had some of the best gains in any single year. He didn't get into the Hall of Fame, but everyone was like, oh, 10th year for Fred McGriff? Yeah, I'll throw that guy a vote. And sometimes it's even just like, hey, I voted for him.
Yeah.
I don't know. My gut says he probably doesn't go in, but it would be really sick if he did. Like, it would be, we're setting ourselves up for a really good election next year, because I think Beltre is an easy first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he's even a guy that gets 90+% of the vote. And we're looking at two guys from this year in Helton and Wagner that should get in next year, given where they're at percentage-wise now.
Yeah, for sure. And with Sheffield's an interesting thing to me because he is associated with PEDs, but not like, he's not like the face of it by any stretch. And it's kind of like, you know, he obviously wasn't doing it while it was punishable, and he never got suspended for it, but he's still like kind of associated with it. However, yeah, he did gain 15% this year, which is pretty stellar. But I like, you know, I don't know if you can compare it to like Clemens and Bonds, because, you know, Bonds and Clemens, they were between what, like
60-ish percent,
60 and 66% for like the final 3 years. So, you know, there is always that sector of Hall of Fame voters, so I think that's probably what's going to stop them.
I do too. I will say, I think Sheffield benefited a lot from being the only steroid speculation guy on the ballot, because, you know, without Bonds and Clemens, I think this year proved a lot that a lot of guys care about steroid suspension versus speculation. I mean, just look at, you know, A-Rod and Manny got 20% less than Sheffield, and they were both much better players than him. So I think that a lot of writers do care about that, and I think that a lot of the reason why we saw big gains from Sheffield is he's the only, you know, steroid suspicion guy.
Yeah. His name is like associated with like the Balco thing, which was a very early 2000s like case that was like talked about, but it wasn't like, oh, Gary Sheffield got suspended for 100 games because of his second violation with PEDs. Never had that situation, so it helps him out. And yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where he lies. I imagine he'll get at least above 60%, but yeah, and I guess it'll be interesting to see how that sets him up for potential like post BBWAA elections.
Do we want to go? I want to do something. I want to have us give one hot take for next year right now.
Oh, one hot take.
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's hard to judge off of that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at these results. I don't know if I have a hot take. Do you have a hot take on your mind?
I do have one hot take. I'll explain mine while I give you time to think of yours.
Okay.
So we've already talked about how we think Helton's definitely going in next year. Wagner is most likely going in next year. Beltre is most likely going in next year. My hot take is Joe Mauer gets in next year as well. If the BBWAA, they get a lot of people talk about them being exclusive and denying people things. But if there's one thing they love to do, they love to vote for catchers, especially guys who can hit, guys who have any sliver of a Hall of Fame chance. They love to vote for. They exceed expectations. Over the last 10 years, there have been 2 catchers on the ballot with any sort of Hall of Fame chance, the first of which was Mike Piazza. He was on the ballot for 4 years, and he was on some of the most stacked ballots you've ever seen. He shared a ballot with guys like, you know, Greg Maddux, with Tom Glavine, Frank Thomas, John Smoltz, Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Ken Griffey Jr., and among many others, Edgar Martinez, Tim Raines, who eventually got in. Like, he was on some of the best ballots you've ever seen, and he got in 4 with steroid suspicions. Like, he admitted in his autobiography that came out before he was elected that he used PEDs for medical purposes. They voted him in 4 years.
Yeah.
The next of which was Pudge Rodriguez. He was the next year after Piazza eventually got in. So he was one of two major first years to headline that class. It was Pudge Rodriguez and it was Vlad Guerrero. And among the two at the beginning of that cycle, I thought, okay, if there's one first ballot Hall of Famer, it's probably Vlad Guerrero, right? A 140 career OPS plus, some of the best offense ever. And Pudge Rodriguez got in over Vlad Guerrero that year. Pudge Rodriguez had 76% of the vote, Vlad had 72%. Like, the Hall of Fame, and granted, both Rodriguez and Piazza objectively were better players than Joe Mauer, sure.
Yeah.
But the BBWA does love their catchers, and it's been 7 years since we've had a legit one. The only catcher that has appeared on any Hall of Fame ballot since Pudge was A.J. Brzezinski, which, no disrespect to him, but, there's not really a strong case or much of any case there. I think the BBWA loves their catchers a little more than people expect, and I think that they show that for Joe Mauer. If he doesn't get in, I think he gets between 65-70 next year.
Yeah. That would be.
And look at that. As I'm saying that, so Scott Rolen is the 9th ranked third baseman by wins above replacement, and they're showing the 9th ranked player of every position by WAR, and Joe Mauer is there at catcher.
Yeah. Wow. Would it be a hot take? Because I don't really have too much hot takes. I think Mauer could possibly get in. I was thinking among these candidates, I think Helton will get in. I think Wagner will probably get in. I don't think Jones will get in, so I'm not going to use that hot take that he will get in. And would it be a hot take to say Beltran does not get a 10% increase?
Yeah, I think that'd be a hot take.
I don't know. I think writers are just going to kind of...
Would you want to round down and say he doesn't get to 55? Because he's at 46.5. That would be an 8.5 vote.
My hot take is he will get between 55 and 56%.
Okay, that's a very specific take.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, you did say 48% with Jeff Kent, and you were close. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's going to be tough to get gains next year. With at least 3 strong first-year candidates, plus also David Wright, who I think will get some votes, especially from the New York writers. Matt Holliday, who I think gets around the same level of support that Torrey Hunter's gotten this year. One thing to note, I'm glad K-Rod stayed on, and I'm honestly surprised he got 10.8. The private ballots must have really liked him.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's dope. He's definitely a guy that I wanted to take another look at. I'm glad that I'll be able to. I probably won't vote for him next year, but, I mean, if he's got 10.8%, I don't think he's falling off next year.
Yeah, interesting. He's, he was, had a big impact as a reliever for a very long time. So, yeah, it would be interesting to look at again. But yeah, he wasn't really close to the 9 or 10 that we voted for. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Anything more you want to talk about before we wrap up this little gut reaction?
I don't know. I feel like there are things, but I can't think of anything specific right now. Obviously we won't be able to see the breakdown of private vote versus public vote until maybe a couple weeks from now, because eventually the BBWAA will release every single ballot that the writers checked to say, is it okay if we make your ballot public?
Yeah.
And there will be 100 guys on there that are on that list but didn't submit their ballot. So there's pre-election results, of course, which we had 207 this year. We had a large surplus of ballots in the last couple of days, more than we usually see. And we also have about 100 or so post-election public ballots and then private ballots, which there's usually around 60, 70 or so. So we won't be able to see that breakdown until a little later, but I'm very excited to see how Scott Rolen's numbers are, because the private ballots crushed him. The post-election public results were pretty nice for him last year. He had 67% of that, but the private ballots destroyed him. He had 34% last year, so I'd love to see if he was able to get that, or if the post-election public results really just carried him.
Yeah.
Because it does make a much larger part of the electorate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it will be interesting to look at that. I think overall recapping the year, I'd say positive.
This was probably the best election we've had, at least since the Jeter Walker election, at the very least.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the Bonds and Clemens and Schilling being off makes things a little bit easier.
It makes things easier and also just less frustrating.
Yes.
Because we had to go through the same song and dance every single year with these cheaters, I don't like these cheaters. And the only, quote unquote cheaters on this ballot, I'm not even gonna include Beltran on this list, are Sheffield, who, might not even be the worst Hall of Fame snub to begin with. Yeah. And A-Rod and Manny, who are two very different cases, obviously.
Yeah. The only two guys, at least two significant guys who have ever been on the ballot, who have ever been suspended for steroids. That's what we got on this on the 2023 election Tuesday.
What an election it was. I cannot wait for next year. Genuinely, this is, there are a lot of times where this process is done and I'm like, okay, it's finally over. I don't have to think about it anymore. I want to let's just breeze through the 2023 MLB season at this point.
Yeah.
let's see.
Let's sim.
Yeah, let's sim to Adrian Beltre and, Chase Utley and Joe Mauer. I think Chase Utley is going to get around the same number of support that Beltran got this year. He'll hover 50.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the best years for this process that I've seen in a while, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's one where I actually feel like I'm left feeling good about the Hall of Fame, and I still don't feel good about the BBWAA. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they elected a guy who deserved it, that got there because of the analytics.
Yes.
Right? Scott Rolen's not an eye test guy. His defense is eye test, certainly. Mm-hmm. But he's not an eye test guy. Analytics got him there, so that's very satisfying. It's also just satisfying to know that Helton and Wagner are more than likely going to get in at some point. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and he's not a 3,000 hit guy, not a 500 home run guy.
Not only that, but also the next 2 years we have slam dunk first-year candidates because we have Ichiro in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's a guy who I think you can get 95+% of the vote, honestly.
Yeah,
Who's not voting for Ichiro?
Yeah, he's a fan favorite, and I think that style of play really tickles the...
Mm-hmm. Especially for a guy that started his major league career at age 27 and still had 3,000 hits.
Right.
That's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at Scott Rolen, man.
Yeah, he hit 311 career average and infield hits galore, stolen bases, a lot of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that should wrap it up for this for the 2023 Baseball Hall of Fame election gut reaction from Above Replacement Radio. If you want to hear more of us, check out the Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube streams. The YouTube channel is Above Replacement Radio. If you want to see, why Scott Rolen deserved to, check out the short we did about that. It's on the YouTube channel Above Replacement Radio. Follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow me on Instagram at Chris Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time for a full episode where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball once again. See you then.
Woo!
This conversation is over.